The rain hammered against the windows of Martha's diner like tiny fists demanding entry. It was one of those cold November nights when the world seemed determined to wash away all warmth and color, leaving nothing but gray shadows and the distant hum of traffic on wet asphalt. Inside the small diner, fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting an uncertain glow over the red vinyl booths and checkered floor that had seen better days, probably sometime in the 1970s. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, the ones with the hole in the left sole that she kept meaning to replace but never quite had the money for. At 28 years old, she had been working as a waitress at Martha's Diner for 6 years, ever since she dropped out of community college to take care of her sick mother. The dreams she once had of becoming a teacher felt like they belonged to a different person entirely. Someone younger and more naive, someone who still believed that hard work and good intentions were enough to change her circumstances. The diner was nearly empty. Old Joe sat in his usual corner booth, nursing his third cup of coffee and working on a crossword puzzle. He came in every night, ordered the same thing, left the same $2 tip. Sarah appreciated the consistency, even if it did not quite cover her bills. At the counter sat Betty, one of the late-shift nurses from the hospital down the street, eating a slice of apple pie and scrolling through her phone with tired eyes. Sarah glanced at the clock. 9:45. Another hour and 15 minutes until closing time. Then she would catch the last bus home to her tiny studio apartment, heat up whatever leftovers she had managed to bring home from the diner, and collapse into bed, only to wake up and do it all again tomorrow. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was the life she had, and she was trying her best to be grateful for it. At least she had a job. At least she had a roof over her head. At least she was healthy. These were the things she told herself on the hardest days. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago, after a brutal 2-year battle with cancer. Sarah still remembered the day the doctor had delivered the diagnosis, the way her mother's hand had trembled in hers, the way the world had seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything after that had been a blur of hospital visits, experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, mounting medical bills that swallowed her college fund, and then her savings, and then any hope of financial stability. She had dropped out of school in her 2nd year, taking the full-time position at the diner to pay for her mother's care. In the end, it had not been enough. Her mother had died anyway, leaving Sarah with nothing but memories and debt and a grief so profound it sometimes felt like drowning. For months after the funeral, Sarah had moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions but not really living. She worked her shifts, paid what bills she could, ignored the collection calls about the ones she could not. She existed, but she did not thrive. It was her mother's voice that had eventually pulled her back. Not literally, of course, but in her memories. Her mother had been a kindergarten teacher, the kind of person who saw potential in everyone, who believed that kindness could change the world one small act at a time. She had taught Sarah that money was not the measure of a life well lived, that what mattered was how you treated people, especially when no one was watching, especially when it cost you something. So Sarah had kept going. She showed up for her shifts with a smile. She learned her regulars' names and their orders and their stories. She slipped extra food to the kids whose parents looked like they were stretching every dollar. She stayed late to help the dishwasher, Miguel, practice his English. She did what her mother would have done, what her mother had taught her to do. She chose kindness, even when the universe was not kind to her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the jangling of the bell above the door. A gust of cold wind swept into the diner, carrying with it a man who looked like he had been pulled from the very depths of despair. He was probably in his mid-30s, though it was hard to tell beneath the layers of dirt and exhaustion that clung to him like a second skin. His clothes were soaked through, hanging off his thin frame like wet rags. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes held that hollow look Sarah had seen before in people who had lost everything and were running on nothing but survival instinct. He stood in the doorway for a moment, water pooling at his feet, looking around the diner as if trying to decide whether he was welcome. Sarah felt a familiar tug in her chest, that mixture of compassion and helplessness that came from seeing someone in need and knowing you had so little to offer. But she smiled anyway, the same warm smile she gave to every customer, and gestured toward an empty booth. "Come in out of the rain," she said. "Sit any way you like." The man moved slowly, like every step required conscious effort, and slid into a booth near the window. Sarah grabbed a menu and a glass of water, making her way over to him. Up close, she could see that his hands were shaking slightly, whether from cold or hunger or something else entirely, she could not tell. He had a few days' worth of stubble on his face, and there was a cut above his left eyebrow that looked like it was starting to heal. His clothes, beneath the dirt and rain, had once been expensive. She could see the remnants of quality tailoring, good fabric, the kind of things that spoke of a different life. "Here you go," Sarah said, setting down the water and menu. "Take your time looking it over. Can I get you some coffee to start? It will help warm you up." The man's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something flicker there. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise at being treated like a regular customer instead of an unwelcome intrusion. He nodded slowly. "Coffee would be good," he said. His voice was rough, like he had not used it much lately. "Thank you." Sarah returned with a steaming cup of coffee and set it down in front of him. He wrapped both hands around the cup, as if trying to absorb all its warmth at once. She gave him a few minutes before returning to take his order, instinctively knowing he needed that time to gather himself. She had seen that look before, that combination of shame and desperation and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this place would be different, this person would be kind. She busied herself with other tasks, giving him space. Old Joe finished his crossword and signaled for his check. Sarah brought it over, and he paid with exact change, as always, leaving his $2 on the table. "Cold night out there, Joe," said, pulling on his coat. "You be careful getting home, Sarah girl." "I will, Joe. You too. See you tomorrow." Joe nodded and shuffled out into the rain. Betty finished her pie and left a few minutes later. The diner was quiet now, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Sarah refilled the coffee pots and wiped down the counter again, her eyes occasionally drifting to the man in the booth. He was still staring at the menu, though she suspected he was not really reading it. When she could not put it off any longer, she walked back over to him. "What can I get for you tonight?" Sarah asked gently. He looked up at her, and she saw his jaw tighten. His eyes were dark brown, intelligent, and filled with a pain that went deeper than physical hunger. He started, then stopped. His eyes dropped back to the menu. "What is the cheapest thing you have?" Sarah's heart sank. She knew that question. She had asked it herself more times than she cared to remember, in different restaurants and stores when her bank account was running on fumes and payday was still days away. It was the question of someone trying to maintain dignity while their world crumbled around them. It was the question of someone who had once had choices and now had none. "Well," she said, keeping her voice light and non-judgmental, "the soup and sandwich combo is pretty filling, and it is only $8. Comes with a cup of our homemade vegetable soup and half a turkey sandwich. Most people can't even finish it. We make the soup fresh every day, and the bread is from the bakery down the street." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, counting them on the table with careful precision. Sarah watched as he sorted through quarters, dimes, and nickels, his hands still trembling slightly. His fingernails were dirty, broken, the hands of someone who had been sleeping rough. When he finished counting, his shoulders sagged into defeat. "I have $3.40, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "I am sorry. I shouldn't have come in. I thought I had more. I counted wrong." He started to stand, clearly intending to leave, embarrassed and defeated. Sarah reached out and gently touched his arm. His coat was soaked through, cold to the touch. She could feel him shivering. "Wait," she said. "You know what?
I just remembered. We have a special tonight. Manager's orders. We're supposed to clear out the soup before it goes bad. And there's a whole sandwich that got made by mistake earlier. Customer ordered it, but then changed their mind. Would hate to see it go to waste. You would actually be doing us a favor by taking it. We would just have to throw it out otherwise. It was a lie, of course, but a kind one. The man looked at her with those hollow eyes, and she could see he knew it was a lie too, but he was too hungry and too tired and too desperate to argue. His pride warred.
With his need and need won. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do not want to take advantage." "Absolutely," Sarah said firmly, giving him her warmest smile. "Have a seat, please. I will be right back with that food. And you look frozen. Let me get you some more coffee too." She walked back to the kitchen, her heart heavy. She had seen so many people like this over the years, good people who had fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. The economy had been tough, jobs were scarce. One medical emergency or car breakdown or lost paycheck could send someone spiraling into homelessness. She knew how close she herself had come, how thin the line was between stability and disaster. She went to the back room where the employees kept their belongings and opened her purse. Inside was her wallet, and inside her wallet was exactly $23.14, everything she had, until her paycheck came through in 2 days. Rent was already paid, thank God, but she needed groceries and her phone bill was overdue. She had been planning to use this money carefully, stretching it as far as it would go. She pulled out a $20 bill, one of the last bills her grandmother had given her before she passed away 5 years ago. Her grandmother had pressed it into her hand at the hospital in the final days, telling her to use it for something special, something just for herself. "Buy yourself something pretty," her grandmother had whispered, "or go see a movie. Do something that makes you happy. Promise me you will not just spend it on bills." Sarah had been carrying it for all these years, unable to spend it, unable to let go of that final connection to the woman who had essentially raised her when her own parents had been too busy with their own problems, their own addictions, their own failures. Her grandmother had been her rock, the one person who had always believed in her, who had always said she was destined for great things. When her grandmother died, Sarah had felt like she lost her last anchor to hope. She stared at the bill for a long moment, running her thumb over its worn surface. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice. "Some things are more important than holding on to the past, sweetheart. That man out there, he needs this more than you need a memory. I raised you to be kind. I raised you to help when you can. Do the right thing." Sarah folded the bill carefully and put it in her pocket. Her grandmother would have understood. In fact, her grandmother probably would have given away her whole purse and then invited the man home for a proper meal. That was the kind of woman she had been, generous to a fault, always putting others first. Sarah returned to the kitchen and put in an order for the soup and sandwich combo. While it was cooking, she also added a side of fries from her own employee meal allowance, and she asked Miguel, the cook, to make it extra generous. Miguel looked at her knowingly. "Another one?" he asked in his accented English. "Another one," Sarah confirmed. "He looks like he has not eaten in days." Miguel nodded and started preparing the food with extra care. He had been homeless once too, years ago, before Martha had given him a job washing dishes. He understood what it meant to be hungry, to be invisible, to be desperate. He always made sure the meals for people like that were especially good. When the food was ready, Sarah brought it out to the man, along with an extra side of fries, a fresh cup of coffee, and a glass of orange juice she had poured from her own employee drinks. She set everything down in front of him and watched as his eyes widened in disbelief. "This is too much," he protested weakly. "I cannot. You said just soup and a sandwich." "Like I said, it would have gone to waste anyway," Sarah repeated. "And you look like you could use a good meal. Please, eat. Take your time. There is no rush. We do not close for another hour." The man stared at the food for a moment, and Sarah saw his eyes fill with tears. He quickly looked away, embarrassed, and began to eat. He started slowly at first, as if trying to remember the proper way to use utensils, as if his body had forgotten what it was like to have food. But soon he was eating with the single-minded focus of someone who had not eaten in days, someone whose body was crying out for sustenance. Sarah gave him privacy, moving away to tend to other tasks. She refilled the ketchup bottles, rolled silverware and napkins, wiped down the already clean tables. But she kept an eye on him, making sure she was okay, ready to intervene if he needed anything else. She brought him more coffee without being asked, and when he had finished the sandwich, she brought him a slice of pie. "We made too many today," she said, setting down the pie with a smile. "Apple, fresh from the oven this afternoon. Manager says we need to clear them out before tomorrow. Would you like some ice cream on top? We have vanilla." The man looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Confusion, maybe, or wonder, as if he could not quite understand why a stranger was being so kind. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. Finally, he just nodded. "Yes, please," he said softly. "That would be very nice. Thank you." Sarah brought the ice cream and watched as he ate the pie more slowly, savoring each bite. The color was starting to come back to his face, and his hands had stopped shaking so badly. He looked more like a person now, and less like a ghost. While he ate, the diner remained quiet. A couple of late-night truckers came in, ate quickly, and left. A young couple on a date shared a milkshake at the counter. The rain continued its steady assault on the windows, but inside, the diner felt warm and safe, a small oasis of light in the darkness. Sarah went about her closing duties, starting the process of shutting down for the night. She counted the register, balanced the receipts, started cleaning the coffee machines. All the while, she was aware of the man in the booth, taking his time with the pie, staring out the window at the rain. When he finally finished, Sarah brought him his check. The $3.40 he had counted out earlier still sat on the table, carefully stacked. She had written $0 on the ticket. "I cannot accept this," the man said, looking at the check and then at her. "You have been incredibly kind, more than I deserve, but I cannot let you do this. This is wrong. You should not have to pay for my meal." "It is already done," Sarah said gently. "But I tell you what, if it makes you feel better, you can pay it forward someday. When you are back on your feet, help someone else who needs it. That is payment enough for me." The man's eyes filled with tears again, and this time he did not try to hide them. They spilled down his cheeks as he looked at her. "I do not understand," he said, his voice breaking. "Why are you being so nice to me? You do not know me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. I could be a bad person who deserves this." Sarah sat down across from him in the booth. She thought about her answer carefully, wanting to give him the truth. "Because everyone deserves kindness," she said simply. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter what their circumstances are. And because I have been where you are, not exactly, maybe, but close enough. I know what it feels like to be desperate, to feel like the world has forgotten you exist. I know what it means when someone shows you a little compassion. It can make all the difference." The man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I had a company," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, "a tech startup. We were developing software for environmental monitoring, helping cities track pollution levels and optimize their green initiatives. Real-time air quality data, predictive modeling for environmental hazards, integration with smart city infrastructure. It was going to change things. We were going to make the world better. We had investors lined up, major contracts ready to sign with cities across the country. I had a team of 8 incredible people who believed in the vision as much as I did. I had an apartment in the nice part of town, a car, a fiancé who I was planning to marry. 6 months ago, I had everything. I was living the dream." He paused, his hands clenching into fists on the table. Sarah waited, letting him tell his story at his own pace. "What happened?" she asked softly. "My business partner," he continued, his voice hardening, "my best friend since college.
The guy who was the best man at my brother's wedding. The guy I trusted more than anyone in the world. He had been embezzling from the company for over a year. Small amounts at first, easy to miss in the chaos of running a startup, but it added up, hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I finally found out, when I finally noticed the discrepancies in the accounts, I confronted him, and he destroyed everything. The man's voice shook with anger and grief. He had access to all our accounts, all our files, all our proprietary code. We had built this revolutionary algorithm, years of work, and he had all the passwords. When I told him I was going to the police, he wiped everything. Deleted the servers, stole what money was left in the accounts, and disappeared. But before he left, he sent emails to all our investors and clients, making it look like I was the one stealing, like I was the one who had betrayed everyone. He forged documents, fabricated evidence, created this entire narrative where I was the villain and he was the victim who had discovered my crimes. Sarah listened, horrified. "That is awful," she said. "That is beyond awful. How could someone do that to a friend?" "I do not know," the man said. "I have asked myself that question 1,000 times. We grew up together. We started the company
Together. I thought I knew him, but I guess you never really know anyone, do you? People can hide who they really are for years, and you never see it until it is too late." He took a shaky breath. "I tried to fight it. I hired a lawyer, tried to clear my name, tried to prove my innocence. But lawyers are expensive, and I ran through my savings in weeks. My fiancée left me. She said she could not handle the stress, could not be with someone who might be a criminal, could not stand the scandal. My family, they did not believe me either. They thought I was lying, trying to cover my own mistakes. My father told me I was a disgrace. My mother stopped taking my calls. My brother said he never wanted to see me again." Sarah felt tears pricking her own eyes. She could not imagine that kind of betrayal, that kind of total abandonment by everyone you loved. "I lost my apartment," the man continued, "lost my car, lost everything. I have been on the streets for 3 months now, trying to figure out how to rebuild. But every door I knock on slams in my face. My reputation is ruined. No one wants to hire someone with my background, even though I am innocent. No one wants to take a chance on someone accused of corporate fraud. I have sent out hundreds of job applications. Nothing, not even interviews. I tried sleeping in shelters, but they are full most nights, and the ones that have space, they are not safe. I tried staying with old friends, but word got around about what supposedly happened, and suddenly no one wanted anything to do with me." He looked down at his hands. "I thought about ending it," he admitted quietly, "more than once. I stood on a bridge 2 weeks ago, looking down at the water, thinking how easy it would be to just let go. Thinking that maybe everyone would be better off without me. Thinking that maybe I deserved this somehow, even though I did nothing wrong. But I could not do it. Some part of me, some stupid, stubborn part of me, still believes that the truth matters, that justice exists, that things can get better. I do not know why I still believe that, given everything that has happened. But I do." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. She could feel how cold it still was, how rough his skin had become. "I am glad you did not do it," she said firmly. "I am glad you are still here, and I am glad you came into this diner tonight. What happened to you is not fair. It is not right. But you are not alone, even if it feels that way. There are still good people in the world. There is still hope." The man looked at her, and she saw a spark of something in his eyes. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of hope.
the willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "What is your name?" he asked. Sarah Mitchell." "I am David," he said, "David Chen, and I want you to know that what you did tonight, it is more than just a meal. It is more than money or food or kindness. It is hope. It is a reminder that there is still good in the world, that not everyone is out to hurt you, that sometimes people help just because it is the right thing to do. I will never forget this. I promise you, if I ever get back on my feet, if I ever rebuild my life, I will pay this kindness back 1,000 times over. I swear it." "Just pay it forward," Sarah said. "That is all I ask. Help someone else when you can. That is how we make the world better, one small act of kindness at a time." David nodded slowly, then slid out of the booth. He picked up his $3.40 from the table, looking at the coins as if they represented everything he had left in the world, which they probably did. But before he could leave, Sarah stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Hold on just 1 minute." She went to the back room and grabbed the $20 bill from her pocket. She also found an old jacket that had been left behind by a customer months ago, never claimed from the lost and found. It was a men's jacket, dark blue, waterproof, in decent condition. It wasn't much, but it would be warmer and drier than what David was wearing. She brought both back to him. "Take these," she said, holding out the jacket and the money. "Please. It is going to be cold tonight, and you will need somewhere warm to stay. There is a hostel about 10 blocks from here, on 5th Street. They charge $15 a night for a bunk, and they usually have space this time of evening. Get yourself a warm, dry place to sleep tonight. Tomorrow is a new day. Things can get better." David stared at the $20 bill in her hand, then at her face. "I cannot," he said. "You have already done too much. This is your money. You need it." "I will be fine," Sarah said, though she was not entirely sure that was true. But she knew she would figure it out, the way she always did. David needed this more than she did. "You need this now. Please, take it, for me. It would make me feel better knowing you have somewhere safe to stay."
Tonight. David's hands shook as he took the jacket and the money. He put on the jacket first, and even though it was a little big, she could see the immediate relief on his face at having something dry against his skin. Then he looked at the $20 bill, really looked at it, and fresh tears spilled down his face. "I do not know how to thank you," he whispered. "I do not have the words. You are? Thank you. Thank you so much." "You do not have to thank me," Sarah said gently. "Just promise me you will not give up. Promise me you will keep trying, keep fighting. Promise me you will remember that your life has value, that you matter, that this is not the end of your story." "I promise," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will not give up. I will keep going, and I will never, never forget what you did for me tonight. Sarah Mitchell. I will remember that name for the rest of my life." Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and hugged Sarah, a brief, desperate embrace that spoke of profound gratitude and human connection and the overwhelming relief of being seen as a person instead of a problem. When he pulled away, he looked at her one more time, as if trying to memorize her face, to carry this moment with him into whatever came next. "Thank you," he said again, "for everything, for treating me like I matter, for giving me hope, for reminding me that there is still good in the world." "Take care of yourself, David," Sarah said, "and good luck. I will be thinking of you, hoping things get better." David nodded, tucked the $20 bill carefully into the inside pocket of the jacket, and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back one more time, then stepped out into the rain.
Sarah watched through the window as he walked down the street, the jacket a small spot of dark blue against the gray curtain of rain. She watched until he disappeared around the corner. Then she stood there a moment longer, saying a silent prayer for his safety, for his future, for the possibility that, sometimes, against all odds, things worked out. Then she returned to closing the diner, her hands moving automatically through the familiar tasks. She locked the door, turned off most of the lights, finished cleaning the coffee machines, stacked the chairs on the tables. When everything was done, she grabbed her own coat, an old thing with a broken zipper that she had been wearing for 3 years, and stepped out into the rain. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, and she walked quickly, her thin coat doing little to protect her from the cold and wet. She thought about David, hoped he had made it to the hostel, hoped he was somewhere warm and dry. She thought about her $20, gone now, and about the grocery shopping she had planned to do, the food she would not be buying. She would have to make do with what was in her cupboard, stretch the rice and beans and pasta as far as they would go. She had done it before, she would do it again. When she reached the bus stop, there was an elderly woman there, hunched under an inadequate umbrella. Sarah recognized her as Mrs. Henderson, one of her regular customers who came in for breakfast every Saturday. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, "working late again." "Always," Sarah said with a smile. "How are you, Mrs. Henderson?" "Oh, you know, getting by. These old bones do not like the rain much, but what can you do?" They chatted until the bus arrived, and when it did, Sarah helped Mrs. Henderson navigate the steps. They sat together for the ride, talking about the weather, the diner, Mrs. Henderson's grandchildren who lived out of state. Normal things, everyday things, the small connections that made up a life. When Sarah finally arrived at her small studio apartment, it was past midnight. She unlocked the door and stepped into the familiar space. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and furniture that had been old when she got it. But it was hers, and it was clean, and it was safe. She heated up some leftover rice and beans from 2 days ago, ate standing at the counter, then collapsed into bed, exhausted. Before she fell asleep, she thought about David one more time. She hoped he was okay. She hoped he had found the hostel. She hoped tomorrow would be kinder to him than today had been. And then she closed her eyes and let sleep take her, knowing she would wake up in a few hours and do it all again. The months that followed were hard ones for Sarah. Her paycheck came, but it was smaller than expected because she had taken a day off when she was sick. The grocery shopping was lean. Her phone was disconnected for 2 weeks until she could scrape together enough to pay the bill. Her landlord raised the rent by $50 a month, a small amount that might as well have been $1,000 for all the difference it made to her budget. But she kept going. She kept showing up. She kept fighting. She called friends for new shifts, took temporary jobs, and sometimes just prayed.
She kept treating her customers with kindness and respect. She kept helping when she could, slipping extra fries to the kids, adding a little extra to the portions for people who looked hungry, listening to the stories of the lonely ones who just needed someone to talk to. She thought about David sometimes, wondered if he had made it, if he had found his way back to stability. But mostly, she was too busy surviving to dwell on it. Life had a way of pushing you forward whether you were ready or not. The bills kept coming, the work kept demanding, the days kept passing, one after another, each one much like the last. The diner changed ownership that first year after her encounter with David. Martha, who had owned the place for 30 years, decided to retire and sell to a chain restaurant company. They immediately began renovations, updating everything, modernizing the space. The red vinyl booths were replaced with trendy wooden tables. The checkered floor was torn up and replaced with gray tile. The menu changed, adding expensive artisanal items and removing the cheap, filling options that had fed so many people on tight budgets. Sarah kept her job through the transition, though many of the other longtime employees were let go. She was good at her job, efficient and friendly, and the new management appreciated that. But it was not the same. The soul of the place was gone, replaced by corporate efficiency and profit margins. It bothered her, but she needed the job, so she adapted. 2 years passed. Sarah turned 30. She was still working at the diner, still living in the same small apartment, still struggling to make ends meet. She had long since accepted that her dreams of college, of becoming a teacher, were not going to happen. This was her life, and while it was not what she had hoped for, it was enough. It had to be enough. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, everything changed. The lunch rush had just ended, and Sarah was refilling salt shakers when her manager, Kyle, approached her with an odd expression on his face. Kyle was young, maybe 25, earnest but inexperienced. He had only been managing the restaurant for 6 months, and he was still learning. "Sarah," he said, sounding nervous, "there is someone here to see you. He is in the private dining room." Sarah looked up, confused. The private dining room was only used for special events or when corporate executives visited. She had never been called there before, and her first instinct was panic. What had she done wrong? Was she being fired? Had someone complained about her service? "What is this about?" she asked, her stomach knotting with anxiety. "I do not know," Kyle said, looking equally bewildered. "He just asked for you, specifically, by name. Said it was important. He seems important. Expensive suit, you know? Very polished." Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't think of anyone who would fit that description, couldn't imagine who would be looking for her. But there was nothing to do but find out. She followed Kyle to the back of the restaurant, her heart pounding, her palms sweating. When she pushed open the door to the private dining room, she stopped dead in her tracks, unable to believe what she was seeing. Sitting at the table, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months, his hair neatly styled, his face clean-shaven and healthy, was David Chen. But he looked nothing like the desperate, hollow-eyed man who had stumbled into the diner 2 years ago. This David looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine, like he owned the world. When he saw her, his face lit up with a huge smile, and he stood immediately. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was full of warmth and joy and gratitude, "it is really you." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. Her brain could not reconcile the man before her with the one she remembered. "David?" she finally managed to say. "Is that really you?" "It is," David confirmed, still smiling. "I kept my promise. I told you I would never forget. I told you I would pay your kindness back 1,000 times over." Sarah walked slowly into the room, still staring, still trying to understand. "You look so different," she said. How? I don't understand. What happened?" David gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit down. I have so much to tell you. And I have been looking for you for 6 months." "Looking for me?" Sarah asked, sinking into the chair. "Why?" "Because I owed you everything," David said simply. "Because you saved my life, and I needed to find you to say thank you, to do more than say thank you, to actually show you what your kindness meant, what it became." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "After I left the diner that night, I used the $20 you gave me to get a room at that hostel you mentioned. It was not much, just a bunk bed and a shared room."
With 5 other guys, but it was warm and it was dry, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could think clearly. I spent that night lying awake, thinking about everything you said, about not giving up, about paying it forward, about how my life still had value. David paused, gathering his thoughts. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done letting my former partner's betrayal define my life. You told me not to give up, and I decided I was going to take that advice seriously. So, I made a plan. What kind of plan? Sarah asked, leaning forward. I went to the public library, David said. I spent 16 hours there that first day, and then every day after that for months. I was researching, planning, writing code on the public computers. I had nothing but my knowledge and my skills, so that is what I used. I started rebuilding my software from scratch, working entirely from memory, improving on the original design. It took me 3 months, living in that hostel, eating the cheapest food I could find, spending every waking hour at the library. But I did it. I created something even better than what I had lost. But how did you get funding? Sarah interrupted. You said no one would work with you because of your reputation. I did not go to traditional investors, David explained. I could not. No VC firm would touch me with a 10-foot pole. So I did something different. I launched a crowdfunding campaign. I put together a video explaining what had happened to me, showing my software demo, and asking people to believe in me, to give me a second chance. I was completely honest about everything. The embezzlement, the betrayal, the accusations against me. I laid it all out there. And people responded? Sarah asked. Not at first, David admitted. The first week, I raised maybe $300, mostly $5 and $10 donations from strangers who were moved by the story. But then something happened. A tech journalist, a woman named Rebecca Wu, she found my campaign. She had actually followed my original company and remembered the scandal. But instead of just writing me off, she decided to investigate. She spent 2 months digging into the story, following the money trail, tracking down my former partner. David's smile grew wider. She found him, Sarah, in the Cayman Islands, living under a fake name, enjoying the money he had stolen. She found bank records, emails, everything. She published an article exposing the whole truth, clearing my name completely. When that article came out, everything changed overnight. Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. That is amazing, she said. So your reputation was restored? More than restored, David said. Suddenly, I was not just the guy who had been falsely accused. I was the guy who had been betrayed and had fought back and had built something new from nothing. I became this symbol of resilience and second chances. My crowdfunding campaign exploded. Within a week, I had raised $2 million. Real investors started reaching out. My former team members, the ones who had abandoned me, they came back, apologizing, asking to be part of the company again. David leaned back in his chair, shaking his head as if he still couldn't quite believe it. Within 6 months of that article being published, I had raised $20 million in seed funding. We rebuilt the company from the ground up. We improved the software, expanded the vision, hired the best people we could find. And the market was ready for us. Cities were desperate for good environmental monitoring solutions. We signed contracts with New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Chicago, then international cities, London, Tokyo, Singapore, Sydney. He paused, letting that sink in. Within a year, we had contracts worth $200 million. We went from 8 employees to 500. We opened offices in 6 countries. We became one of the fastest-growing environmental tech companies in the world. And last month, a major tech conglomerate, one of the biggest in the world, offered to acquire my company for $1.2 billion. I accepted the offer. Sarah, I am a billionaire now. It still doesn't feel real. I wake up some mornings and think I must be dreaming. Sarah sat there, speechless, trying to process what she was hearing. $1 billion. It was an amount so large it defied comprehension. She thought about her own life, about counting pennies, about choosing between paying the phone bill or buying groceries. She thought about her $20, the last gift from her grandmother, and how it had seemed like such a huge sacrifice at the time. That is incredible, she finally said, her voice soft. I am so happy for you, David. You deserved a second chance. You deserved to rebuild your life.
And you did it. You really did it. But I did not come here just to tell you my success story, David said, his expression becoming serious. I came here
because of a promise I made 2 years ago. I told you I would pay your kindness back 1,000 times over. I meant it, Sarah, every word. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I have thought about you every single day for the past 2 years, he said. Every time we hit a milestone, every time we signed a new contract, every time something good happened, I thought about you, about that rainy night, about your kindness, about how you gave me hope when I had none. He slid the envelope across the table to Sarah. She looked at it, but did not pick it up. "What is this?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "Open it," David said gently. "Please." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a check. She pulled it out and looked at the amount written there, then looked again, certain she had misread the numbers. But they were clear, written in both numerals and words. $2 million, made out to Sarah Mitchell, signed by David Chen. Sarah stared at the check, her vision blurring with tears. "I cannot," she started. "I cannot accept this. This is too much. This is way too much. I just bought you a meal. I gave you $20. That does not equal $2 million. It does not make sense." "It makes perfect sense to me," David said firmly. "Sarah, do you remember what you told me that night? You said people can choose to be kind even when the universe is not kind. You said that has to count for something. You were right. It counts for everything." He leaned forward, his eyes intense and sincere. "You gave me hope when I had absolutely none. You treated me like a human being with dignity and value when everyone else in my life had written me off as a failure or a criminal. You gave me your last $20, money you desperately needed yourself, because you believed that people mattered more than money. That is worth everything, Sarah. That is worth more than any amount I could ever give you." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "But $2 million, she protested. "I did not do it for money. I did not do it expecting anything in return. I just did what felt right, what anyone should do." "Exactly," David said. "That is exactly why you deserve this. You did it because it was right, not because you expected a reward. You helped me because you are a good person, because you have compassion and empathy and kindness in your heart. Those qualities are rare, Sarah, rarer than you know, and they should be rewarded." He gestured to the check. "That $20 you gave me, it was not just money. It was seed capital for my entire life. It gave me a warm, safe place to sleep that night, which gave me the clarity to make a plan. That plan led to the library, which led to the rebuilt software, which led to the crowdfunding campaign, which led to everything else. Your $20 became $1.2 billion, and I think it is only fair that you get a significant return on your investment." Sarah looked down at the check again, at the impossible number written there. $2 million. It was more money than she had ever imagined having. It was enough to pay off every debt she had ever accumulated. It was enough to go back to school, to finally finish her degree, to become the teacher she had always dreamed of being. It was enough to buy a real apartment, a car, to live without the constant anxiety of wondering how she was going to pay her bills. It was enough to change her entire life. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will accept it," David replied. "Please, let me do this. Let me honor the kindness you showed me. Let me help you the way you helped me." Sarah thought about her mother, about her grandmother, about all the people who had taught her that kindness mattered, that helping others was more important than accumulating wealth. And she thought about how hard she had worked, how much she had sacrificed, how many dreams she had put aside. She thought about the $20, about the jacket, about the meal she had paid for from her own pocket. She had done those things not expecting any return, but here it was, multiplied beyond anything she could have imagined. She looked up at David, at this man who had been broken and desperate and who had rebuilt himself into something remarkable.
She saw the genuine gratitude in his eyes, the real need he had to repay the debt he felt he owed. And she realized that sometimes letting someone help you was not weakness, it was grace. It was allowing the circle of kindness to complete itself. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I accept. Thank you, David. Thank you so much." David's face broke into a huge smile. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for accepting this. Thank you for everything you did for me. Thank you for being who you are." "But that is not all," David continued, pulling out another document from his briefcase. "I have also done something else. I have created a foundation."
The Second Chance Foundation. Our mission is to help people who are struggling, who have fallen on hard times through no fault of their own, who just need someone to believe in them and give them a chance to rebuild. We are going to provide financial assistance, job training, mental health support, housing assistance, everything people need to get back on their feet. "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "And I want you to be on the board of directors," David said. "I want your voice there, your perspective, your wisdom. You understand what it means to struggle. You understand what kindness looks like in action. We need that on the board. We need someone who will always remember what it is like to be on the other side, to be the one who needs help." Sarah stared at him. "Me? On a board of directors? David, I am just a waitress. I dropped out of college. I do not know anything about running a nonprofit or being on a board or any of that corporate stuff." "You are not just a waitress," David said firmly. "You are one of the most compassionate, thoughtful, and wise people I have ever met. You have exactly the kind of perspective we need. We do not need more business executives or lawyers on the board. We have plenty of those. We need someone who understands what it is really like to struggle, what it is really like to need help, what it is really like to be on the receiving end of kindness. That is you, Sarah." He slid the document across the table. "The board meets once a month, and you will be compensated for your time and expertise. But more importantly, you will be helping people, real people, just like I was that night. People who have lost everything but still have the strength to keep going. People who just need someone to see their potential and give them a chance." Sarah looked at the document, at the official letterhead, at her name listed as a board member. It felt surreal, impossible, but it also felt right. It felt like her life was finally making sense, like all the struggles and sacrifices were leading somewhere meaningful. "Yes," she said, looking up at David. "Yes, I would be honored to serve on the board. I want to help people. I want to make a difference." "Perfect," David said, reaching across the table to shake her hand. "Welcome to the Second Chance Foundation, Sarah Mitchell." They talked for another 2 hours, making plans, discussing the foundation's goals, sharing stories about their lives. David told her about the company he had built, about the environmental work they were doing, about the cities becoming cleaner and smarter because of his software. He told her about reconnecting with his family after his name was cleared, though those relationships were still strained. He told her about dating again, though he was taking it slow, not ready to trust anyone completely after what had happened with his fiancée. Sarah told him about her mother's illness and death, about dropping out of college, about her dreams of becoming a teacher. She told him about the struggles of the past few years, about the bills and the debt and the constant worry. She told him about the other people she had helped at the diner over the years, the small kindnesses she tried to offer whenever she could. As they talked, Sarah realized something profound. Yes, the $2 million was life-changing. Yes, the opportunity to serve on the foundation board was incredible. But the real gift David had given her was something else entirely. It was the validation that her choices mattered, that her kindness was not foolishness or naivety, that helping others, even when it cost her something, was the right thing to do.
He had proven to her that goodness could win, that sometimes the universe did reward people for doing the right thing, that hope was not misplaced. "There is one more thing," David said as their conversation wound down. He looked around the private dining room, then out at the restaurant beyond. "This building, this whole property actually, I bought it this morning." Sarah's eyes widened. "You bought the restaurant?" "I did," David confirmed. "The corporate chain that owns it now was happy to sell. They have hundreds of locations, and this one was not particularly profitable for them. I bought the building and the business, and I am going to restore it to what it used to be. Martha's Diner. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, affordable food that actually fills you up. A place where everyone is welcome, no matter who they are or how much money they have in their pocket." Sarah felt her heart swell. "That is perfect," she said. "This place used to be so special. It used to be a real community gathering place. I miss that." "So do I," David said. "And I want you to run it." Sarah blinked. "What?" "I want you to be the general manager," David explained. "You will have complete control. Set your own hours, hire your own staff, design your own menu, create the kind of environment you think is right. I will provide the capital.
Funding and support, but the vision will be yours. Make it the kind of place you always wanted to work in, the kind of place where people are treated with dignity and respect, where no one goes hungry, where kindness is the first priority." Sarah could barely breathe. "You are giving me a restaurant to run? I am giving you an opportunity to create the kind of place that changed my life," David said. "A place where someone like me, desperate and broken, can walk in and be treated like a human being. Can you do that?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes. I would love that. I would be honored." "Excellent," David said, standing up and extending his hand again. "Then it is settled. Welcome to your new job, General Manager Mitchell." Sarah stood and shook his hand, feeling like she was floating, like none of this could possibly be real. In one afternoon, her entire life had changed. She had gone from struggling waitress to millionaire, from hourly employee to general manager, from invisible to valued. It was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "When can I start?" she asked. "Whenever you are ready," David said. "We will need a few weeks to do the renovations, to restore the space to how it used to look. During that time, you can start planning the menu, thinking about who you want to hire, developing your vision. I will have my team handle all the legal and financial details. All you need to do is dream big and tell us what you need to make that dream real." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were pure joy. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much, David. You have no idea what this means to me." "Actually, I do," David said gently, "because I know exactly what it feels like to have someone believe in you when you have stopped believing in yourself. I know what it means to be given a second chance, and now I get to give that to you, the way you gave it to me. It is the greatest honor of my life." They hugged again, a longer embrace this time, two people whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way, and who had both been transformed by that intersection. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling through their tears. "This is just the beginning," David said. "We are going to do great things together, Sarah. We are going to help so many people. We are going to change lives." "I cannot wait," Sarah said. That night, Sarah caught her usual bus home one last time. She sat in her usual seat, looking out the window at the city passing by. But everything looked different now. The same streets, the same buildings, but she was seeing them through new eyes. Eyes that saw possibility instead of limitation. Eyes that saw hope instead of despair. She thought about the check in her purse, carefully folded and protected in an envelope. $2 million. Tomorrow she would go to the bank and deposit it, and her life would never be the same. She would pay off her debts, all of them,
every single bill that had been hanging over her head for years. She would call the community college and ask about re-enrollment. She would look for a better apartment, something with an actual bedroom, maybe even a small balcony. She would buy new shoes, ones without holes. She would do all the practical things. But more than that, she would help people. Through the foundation, through the restaurant, through every interaction she had going forward. She would pay forward the kindness that had been shown to her, multiplied 1,000 times over. She would make sure that every person who walked into Martha's Diner felt valued and seen and cared for. She would make sure that no one went hungry on her watch. She would create the kind of place her mother and grandmother would have been proud of. When she arrived at her small studio apartment, Sarah unlocked the door and sat down on her worn couch. She pulled out the check and looked at it again, still hardly believing it was real. Then she thought about that rainy night 2 years ago, about David sitting in the booth, hollow-eyed and desperate. She thought about the $20 bill, her grandmother's final gift. She thought about the choice she had made to help, even though it cost her something. That choice, that single moment of kindness, had rippled out in ways she never could have imagined. It had saved David's life. It had led to a billion-dollar company. It had created a foundation that would help thousands of people. And it had transformed her own life beyond anything she had ever dreamed possible. She closed her eyes and said a silent thank you. Thank you to her grandmother for teaching her the value of kindness. Thank you to her mother for showing her what compassion looked like in action. Thank you to David for keeping his promise and for believing that her kindness mattered. Thank you to the universe for this incredible, impossible gift. Tomorrow would be the first day of her new life. She would wake up not as a struggling waitress, but as a woman with resources and opportunities and the power to make real change in the world. She would begin the work of transforming Martha's Diner back into what it was meant to be. She would start her service on the foundation board. She would take the first steps toward finishing her degree and becoming the teacher she had always wanted to be. But tonight, she would simply sit in her small apartment and feel grateful. Grateful for the struggles that had taught her empathy. Grateful for the hardships that had shown her what really mattered. Grateful for the chance to prove that kindness was not weakness, that compassion was not naivety, that helping others was the most important thing a person could do. She thought about something her grandmother used to say, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." Sarah had given her last $20 to a stranger, expecting nothing in return. And somehow, impossibly, that gift had come back to her multiplied beyond measure. But the real gift was not the money. The real gift was the knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had changed a life, that her choice to be kind, to help, to care had mattered in the most fundamental way. That was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. Sarah Mitchell fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, dreaming of red vinyl booths and checkered floors, of people being fed and cared for, of a world where kindness was the norm instead of the exception. She dreamed of second chances and new beginnings, and the beautiful, mysterious ways that compassion could ripple out and change everything. And when she woke up the next morning, those dreams would begin to become reality.